And I think the issues will come is whether this sections which are where if one has to look at ATA A6 and ATA AN etc. it covers various sections, but 92BA specific dealing with SDT 1 it does not cover 35 AD 7 etc. So therefore I think one can go strictly as per the law. I think somewhere, at least I was unable to find that. I think there will be still some taxpayers who will still be falling, that last year of tax holiday, 10A, 1A, somewhere, one more year, possibly. I was struggling to find, because nowhere any of the sections, 10A, 1A has been covered when it comes to SDT. But I was unable to be very honest, unable to find this. But if there are, I think possibly having regard to the intention, etc., one may look at it again, from a materiality, etc., and penalty, whether if there are such situations we need to do any SDT compliance or no. I think this was one, and this was a very specific case which came up, was that the company, there was a company and another related party which was setting up some unit in the SEZ, and what happened was that there was a core team in company 1 who was actually running this business, and it was so core that this unit, which was also in almost similar business, okay, these people were actually transferred from company 1 to company 2. And we all know that I think in software industry, etc., people are regarded as fungible in that sense. But those people were so core that this SEZ could not have started running, could not have been set up and started doing the business without this people's involvement. Therefore, the question comes is that if there is no charge, okay, there is no charge, normal, the cost, etc., may get reimbursed, the cost of those employees, etc. But there was otherwise no charge from company Z to company I. Then whether the tax office can therefore allege that, these people have been responsible for the setup, initial period they were running, whether they should have actually paid some additional consideration for this. I think this is a very a unique situation, but I think, in my view, I think somewhere one will have to look at the SDT provisions in that, because that is so core to SEZ. So I think there could be so-called unique intangibles, etc., which may be getting transferred or whatever. I think one will have to see. There I don't think one can take a position of that, I'm not in that business, etc., because clearly company I is not in business of providing people, well. But as far as, because if you look at, the provisions, etc., they talk of justification from the recipient side, if we will see. So I think this is one, again, it's a unique situation, so one cannot just apply, the law blindly in that sense. That's what it says. Again, it come, typically you have this slum sale, etc. If there are, I just complete one. Yeah, sorry. Earlier slide? Yeah, please. No, I agree. You are saying that, this is also not, a depreciable item. Are you trying to say that? Here, as I said, was only thing was that those people were so key to set up and running the business. So that was very clearly so. Actually, they were providing some services in that sense. It could be a marketable. See, it has the potential of being a marketable service, because if I start doing this business itself, even to other entities around, I could do that. was because so core, and this was something live example which we saw, and somewhere we came to the conclusion that this may, the ordinary principles may not hold good. Yeah. Again, so that's the last, so that I can complete in time. Is the sale, some sale happening, from and assuming that the reconstruction and all those conditions are getting fulfilled. So if there is some sale of any assets going to the eligible unit, again I think one will have to comply with the provisions, because again it's a question of depreciation coming. But again, just to on this, that if it is it should be an eligible expenditure. So once you start claiming it, etc., I think one will have to do the compliance. Okay, that's thanks. I think that was. So any questions? I think Paresh bhai, if you can permit some time, 5 years. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take.
We can take 2 questions.
And also, will it be extended to other common expenses like brand building, goodwill, corporate advertisement, advertisement and marketing, promotion expenses?
See, sir, that I think in any case today also we do. I don't know. We are not going to do something differently. So if it's a advertisement done at a corporate level, we do some kind of a allocation today also on normal gap basis or segmentals or whatever we do, following the segmental principles, etc. Then it could be more of a cost allocation. Then really benchmarking and may not really become necessary. One may only say that you should have allocated based on a cost or a revenue or whichever, or based on the cost. Say for example advertisement, if there are marketing people sitting in the eligible unit, dedicated and non-eligible unit, and the overall, then you do it on the ratio of that cost, etc. But it will be more of you really need not really get into some kind of a benchmarking, independent. That was, but in the situation which I was describing, it was very unique. So that's why the question was whether you need to have some kind of a consideration, because the cost was in any case being reimbursed. So over and above that was the situation.
It's a practical question. If there are 8 eligible units, then for benchmarking and reporting, we have to aggregate all the 8 or individually?
In fact, I was with a council yesterday, and of course that was in the pre-SDT area. How do we do this, because there were some peculiar situations. Now, I think I think that forms, etc., which also talk of some annexures, etc. Now that annexures can be for all units, or I have actually I think either way could be, but I think the safer will be you get it for all 8. No? In any case, it's only a question of filling up the form. No? The annexure computation is already there. Then why you should take any chances?
Okay. Separately for all the units.
Of course, client will not pay you. I don't know how they will pay you, but of course they should pay you. Okay.
Thank you, friends. We are at the end of the third technical session. You have understood the interplay between SDT and international transaction in the first session. Then you understood the interaction between then you have understood the interplay between 40I2 transaction and the 80I transaction. Now you understood interplay between 80I and 40I2 transaction. Also the specific issues of the tax incentive companies, that how fair market value could be adjusted. And with that, I think you have learnt a lot. Most of the objective of the conference, I believe, well served with this session, and one more session to go. And then finally, we will have a panel discussion, which will revise the entire course, perhaps what we learned all of the day. With this, I may request Dinesh Poddar to propose a very well-deserved vote of thanks for Sanjay.
So we are thankful to you for spending your valuable time today.
So we are thankful to you for sparing your valuable time today out of your busy schedule, that also during the TP season going on. We are once again thankful to you for lucidly explaining the issues related to benchmarking various transactions with respect to tax holiday units with the help of practical examples. With this, I on behalf of Chamber of Tax Consultants and member present here propose a hearty vote of thanks and request you all to carry out with this round of loud applause.
Thank you, everyone. And I've given my contact details. Please feel free to write to me. I'll be happy to answer questions. Yeah, please. Thank you.
There will be reshuffling of the dais, and the next session will be starting immediately. Okay.
There's no break, please. Thank you.
Please be seated. We are starting our session immediately. Welcome to this fourth technical session. In this session, we will be having the benefit of learning from a learned faculty on importance of FAR, that is FAR analysis and compatibility analysis, selection of most appropriate method, and issues in disclosure in new Form 3C-EB from SDD perspective. And to deal with this topic, we have with us Sri Pramod Joshi. It's my privilege to introduce this learned faculty before this August gathering. Mr. Pramod Joshi is a chartered accountant and also a law graduate. He is a senior director in Deloitte Haskins & Sales and is based in Pune office. He has got over 15 years of experience in international tax, including transfer pricing. He specializes in international tax and transfer pricing and expatriate taxation. He advises clients on various tax issues, including tax planning, strategies, and taxation of foreign enterprises in India. He has regularly represented various clients in assessment proceedings before various authorities and has argued number of cases before the appellate authorities as well as before the DRP, that is Dispute Resolution Panel. He has been a regular contributor in the professional journals and has been speaking at various forums like National Academy of Direct Taxes, Chamber of Commerce, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, etc. With these brief words, I present before you Sri Pramod Joshi, and I request all of you to welcome him with a loud applause. Before I request Sri Pramod Joshi to deal with the topic, I would request our Vice President Paras Bhai to please offer a memento to Pramod Bhai as a mark of our love and affection. I would request Pramod Bhai to address us, please.
First of all, let me sincerely thank Chamber of Tax Consultants to invite me to speak on one of the sessions for your today's SDT seminar. I am dealing with the transfer pricing for more than since 2002. And when it comes to the specified domestic transaction which has been introduced from financial year 12-13 onwards, I think yes, it is going to play a very important role. And I believe most of you either have been exposed to the transfer pricing or have not been exposed to the transfer pricing in the past. I am not sure on that. But whatever my topics are, which is importance of the FAR and the comparability analysis, selection of most appropriate method, and issues in disclosure, I think first two are very interconnected with each other, while the third one is more importantly both from the chartered accountant's perspective who are certifying the Form 3CB as well as the disclosure from the company's perspective. So first two clearly are very important because any transfer pricing, when you look at it, what is the pricing? Pricing is an inexact science. And when you look at the pricing, the economics plays a very important role in it. And therefore, what we talk about in a technical jargon as what they call about the FAR analysis, that is function, assets and risk analysis. I think that's a technical jargon. Pricing is never a rocket science. It depends on businessman to decide why he is taking a decision in terms of his pricing, keeping in consideration three important aspects. One, functions what he is being performing when he is dealing with the related party. And here I will talk mainly about the dealing with the related parties first, because first you need to understand where you are and what are your related parties. Second, the assets which are involved, and here assets involved doesn't mean only the tangible assets. It involves the intangible assets like technical know-how, brand, trademark, customer base, supplier base, etc. And the third, which is obviously most important, because economic principle says if you are taking more risk, possibility of the more profits or possibility of the significant losses are very much there. And therefore it's a risk what you take in the business. That's all put three together, what they call it as a function assets and the risk analysis, or the FAR. Now if you simplify that from a business perspective, what is function? Function is nothing but the various business activities what you carry out. If you are a manufacturing company, right from your setting up of the plant up to the after sales service, everything is nothing but a function. These are different activities like setting up the plant or the purchasing, manufacturing, pre-marketing, marketing, collection, after sales and all that. That is considered as a function. Obviously any business needs an asset. It could be tangible, it could be intangible. I think my previous speaker was mentioning about some of even the intangible or the fungible assets like employees. Yes, employees these days have become a very, very important asset. They don't form part of your financial statements at all. But those are the assets. And the risk. There could be number of risks which any business would be carrying on. So, what is the pricing, what it talks about? Why this FAR is very, very critical? Is because the pricing depends on if you are doing more functions in a particular transaction, if you are deploying more assets. And here when I say assets, I don't mean by the routine assets like your plant and machinery or a building. It's more in form of an intangible assets or the non-routine assets which are going to generate you the more profits. And the third, which is very important function, is in terms of the risk. So all three put together is nothing but economic functions. So in a transfer pricing analysis, when you want to do a FAR, what you need to look at first is who is performing between the two related parties economically significant functions. And if a party A is performing economically significant function, at the end of the day it is expected. It never materializes always in real life, but it is expected that they should earn a better profit or they should earn a better price, because they are contributing economically significant functions which include functions, assets and the risk. So understanding where you are in an intercompany transaction for the specified domestic transaction. Take example that one company manufactures and sells it to its related party, and another company takes part of it as a part of the distribution and the after sale. Now a transaction or a whole value chain is divided into two parts, which is manufacturing and the distribution. Now who should earn more money? It all depends on what is economic significant functions which are being carried out, and that's very, very critical from the comparability perspective. Because unless and until you know where you are, how can you do a comparison? And I give a very simple example every time for a comparison. What is a comparison? They say in English, apple to apple comparison. So a red apple can be compared with a green apple, certainly yes, both are apples. But two citrus fruits like a lemon and a sweet lime, can you compare? They are citrus fruits. You cannot. Another example for the comparability is doctors. Everybody has learned the medicine, but can a cardiologist be compared with the oncologist? The answer is clearly no. So what you need to understand first, who you are before you start doing your comparison, and therefore function, assets and the risk analysis, first you need to perform for yourself as a company, and then you need to look at for something else for your comparability perspective. And when you do a comparison, it has to be an apple to apple or a very similar comparison. Vehicles are vehicle. Maruti 800 cannot be compared with the Audi. Or Toyota Altis cannot be compared with a Porsche. Both do the same functions. They carry the passengers. But can you do that? You can't. So importance is that when you do any SDT, doing FAR analysis for yourself is very, very critical. That's the heart of any transfer pricing, please remember. Because a computer concept which says garbage in, garbage out. If you do your FAR analysis incorrect, the answer is going to be incorrect. And therefore, you need to spend more and more time in doing the functional analysis, which is your function, assets, and the risk analysis. And why? That's another question. Why you need to do it? As I stated slightly while ago, a price or a profit or the compensation or the return on what you do, whether you do a manufacturing or whether you are providing a service, it's a combination of what kind of activities are you performing, what kind of assets are you deploying, and what kind of risk are you taking. Without that, how will you determine the price? It's a hypothesis. Whether it will happen every time, I do not know. Because I may say I am doing all the functions, I am deploying the maximum assets, and I am taking all the risk. Then there is no reason why you need to deal with the related parties for the same transaction. You do carry out on your own. So considering this, the functional assets and the risk analysis clearly impacts the price for the goods or the service, as well as it is going to impact your profit or the loss. So unless and until you do your FAR analysis very clearly, the arm's length price, what they call it as arm's length price, will not be correct. Because you need to compare your arm's length price with a comparable price or the comparable company, or your arm's length profit with your within internal or outside, which is a comparable company's third parties. So unless and until, again I say, if you don't do your FAR analysis very well, you have a problem. And for that, what you need to do, first you need to understand who you are. Because in a transfer pricing, when you prepare your documentation report, you need to sell your own story to the tax department, that who you are and why are you saying you are like this. So moving to this, there are certain simple examples we can take. Examples like functions performed, what I was saying. Now look at the R&D function. An example can be, entity A is carrying out the R&D, but it is being funded by the entity B for carrying out the R&D. Now who is doing economically significant function? Is it a party which is doing the R&D, or is it a party which is funding the R&D? Because at the end of the day, once the funding is done, he expects some results out of it. He takes a risk. The R&D could be fruitful or R&D can be disaster. Doesn't matter to him. So economically significant function in this case does not mean who is performing the job. But economically significant function in this example means who is funding and taking the risk. That is where, and therefore entity B is performing an economically significant function. In this case, as a result, it is expected that it should get better return back than the entity A, because entity A is performing the work or doing the service which he or she has been told what needs to be done. So he or she will get compensated accordingly. Take another example, a manufacturing versus a processing. Now if you are in a casting business, you need to have a significant investment into a plant and machinery. You need to have a significant consumption of the power. Vis-a-vis, if you are having a plastic molding injection machine and you are doing the work of the processing. Now which is more economically significant? Is it a manufacturing process or is it the normal processing of the job what you are doing? Now here again, economically significant function is performed by the manufacturing of a casting company rather than the processing of the plastic injection molding. Why I am saying so? These are very important. Unless and until you know who is performing the economically significant function, your FAR analysis will go wrong. Let's take few more examples about the risk. As I said, I never took an example of the asset, because if you want to do a business, you need to have an asset. When I look at the international type of transaction for the transfer pricing, a subsidiary company is being set up by the foreign nationals. Say for example, in business process outsourcing or in an ITES company. They need infrastructure, they need building, they need plant and machinery, they need computers, they need routers, they need connectivity. Can this stop when they are outsourcing the work to the India? The answer is no. So non-routine assets would play a major role, but not the routine assets. Any business you need to have that asset. But the functions and the risk will certainly change. Now when you look at the assumption of the risk, a marketing risk, an Indian company has a subsidiary which is doing the marketing of their products. And it says that if you don't get the enough orders, first you need to incur your expenditure on the advertisement and the sales promotion. But if you don't get the adequate business, then you will end up in a loss because of your significant market promotion expenses. I will reimburse you that entire cost. Now here again, who is taking the marketing risk? Is it an entity A which is doing the marketing, or is it an entity B which is giving an assurance that if you don't make enough profits, I'll reimburse you that expense. Again, the risk is taken by the entity B and not by the entity A. Because entity A is a risk insulated entity. If I don't make adequate profits, I am going to get my money back. Next could be inventory. Entity A processes the manufactures the goods. It purchases the goods from the related parties, but it doesn't pay to the related party. The selling price gets adjusted when the goods are shipped to the other related party. Now, who is taking an inventory risk? Is it an entity A which is manufacturing and selling the goods to the related party, or is it an entity B which is paying him net of that? It's the question is, answer is entity B. Because entity A, even if the goods are not dispatched, he doesn't have to worry because he has not paid for the purchases. So it's an entity B which is taking the maximum risk. A third, product liability, very simple. Though if I am manufacturing my own products, I am bound to give you the product liability. But there are certain situations where distributors are responsible for the warranty. A product liability warranty, distributors are responsible. Many times in a related party transaction I have seen is that because the price at which the goods are sold by one related party to another related party is adjusted for the estimated product warranty expenses. Now then in this case, who is taking the risk? It is a distributor who is dealing with the goods is taking the risk. So understand these are some of the important risks which a business takes. They are effectively to get the better results in the form of compensation of the profit. So the function asset of the risk analysis is very, very critical, and which we will come to know why I am saying so in the later slides. But this is very relevant when you are doing any transfer pricing, be international transaction or be it's a related party transaction. Here are some of the examples. More functions vis-a-vis the lesser functions. When you look at the full-fledged manufacturer, means he has including technology, everything. He is doing more functions. But when you look at, compare that with a licensed manufacturer, it means somebody has given me a technical know-how fee and for which I am paying a royalty. Now, the licensed manufacturer is performing lesser functions compared to a full-fledged manufacturer. Obviously, the expected returns for licensed manufacturer would be less compared to the full-fledged manufacturer. Then if you take example of contract manufacturing versus the toll manufacturing, the toll manufacturer performs only the service and therefore he is not expected to get the better results. I think anybody from the pharma industry or the FMCG industry here, they will understand what I am saying very well. Colgate-Palmolive markets the toothpaste, while the toothpaste is manufactured by its loan licensee, is not manufactured by him. So, the loan licensee becomes a contract manufacturer while the Colgate-Palmolive becomes the full-fledged manufacturer because it has only outsourced its work of manufacturing by giving the technology to the contract manufacturer. Toll manufacturer don't take responsibility of any goods. It just renders the service and sends the goods back. So depending upon what kind of functions you are performing, what kind of assets which you are deploying, and what kind of the risk which you are into, that will determine what kind of remuneration you should receive as a part of arm's length principles. Very, very important. Because I pay 200 rupees or 500 rupees only to a general practitioner doctor, while when I go to a specialist, I pay him 5,000 rupees per visit. Why do I do that? Both are doctors. Because both are having different skill sets. And that is their asset what they have. That's the reason I do it. That is a simple example. I think we need to always keep it in mind. Or a normal lawyer, I pay him 5,000 rupees per appearance, but when I appoint Harish Salve, I don't know how much he must be charging. Now both are lawyers. Because they have some uniqueness in the form of their intangible of an asset. That's the reason they get paid. So this is in a transfer pricing analysis, this is very, very critical to understand where you are and what you are. Without that, you can't compare yourself very well. Now function, assets and risk analysis, let's look at from two different perspectives. A manufacturing company, what it could be the reward. There are three different manufacturers, what they say. A toll manufacturer, a contract manufacturer, and a full-fledged manufacturer. Now obviously it is expected, toll manufacturer cannot get the better paid because he doesn't have to invest into plant and machinery. He has to invest into only the employees. Rest all material is being given to him by his customer. He processes the material and sends it back. Why he should get a better profit than the full-fledged manufacturer? A contract manufacturer may be a shade ahead because he invests into a plant and machinery, he should get the better. Or if you are a full-fledged manufacturer, obviously you are expected to get better. So if your client or your company is into a contract manufacturing, then the comparable companies what you need to select should be of a contract manufacturer and not of a full-fledged manufacturer. Otherwise the comparability will change. It will go for a complete 6. Today the match is going on obviously between India and Australia. The next is distributor. Now we easily say distributor, he is a trader or he is a distributor. However, there are a number of differences between the distributor or a trader, what they call. Somebody is just a commission agent. He doesn't take any liability or the risk or the ownership of the goods. He introduces to willing buyer and to seller and gets his commission. And that's the reason they get a commission of 0.5% or 1%, not more than that, of a transaction value. Because their entire value chain, their activities are very, very limited and therefore they are not expected to earn better. While there are certain parties who instantly buy and make a sale. They don't invest into the inventory. They don't have to worry about their debtors because they are cash. They work on the cash. Again, they are not expected to get a better return. But if I am a full-fledged distributor, what I do is I buy, I keep it inventory, I need to market, I need to provide the after-sale service, I need to go after collection, all the entire gamut of the distribution function which I am doing, then I am expected that I should get the better results. And this is very important because there are certain Indian groups who manufactures and sells it to their related party and then the related party distributes in the marketplace. So where you are, what you are, accordingly the rate, risk or the return will come back to you. This is very important as far as the function, assets and the risk analysis is concerned. Because unless you don't profile yourself very well in terms of the FAR analysis, the answer, time and again I will say, the answer of your arm's length price and comparing your arm's length price with the tested party price would be completely wrong. Completely wrong. So the first and foremost principle of the transfer pricing is the function, assets and the risk analysis. Having understood where you are, now you need to do the comparability analysis. And how you can do a comparability analysis? You can do a comparability analysis internally or you can do the comparability analysis externally. My experience of SDT dealing with all my clients, more than 90% of the clients I can find the internal comparables. Rarely there is a transaction where I cannot find internal comparison, I need to look at for the third party comparison. So from an SDT perspective, very, very critical, please see to it whether you have an internal comparability available or not. More often than not, you sell the goods to your related party as well as you sell the goods to your unrelated party. In many cases it is by and large the same, there is no difference coming in. Then you have an internal comparability available. So first, my humble view, if you are exposed to the SDT, comparability from the internal perspective first try and see. If it is not there, then only you go for the third party comparison. And why I am saying so? Internal, you have better control your information, your details, your analysis than when you need to do a comparison with the third parties where your analysis is restricted to the financial statements. So you look at their director's report, you look at their notes to accounts, you look at their balance sheet and do a financial analysis, which is not really an economic analysis what you can do. But from an SDT perspective, if internal is available, please focus on the internal comparability first. And obviously that internal comparability you can do again doing your function, asset and the risk analysis. And if there are certain adjustments which are required to be made, you need to make those an adjustment to the price. Or you may have to make an adjustment to the profit of a segment between related party segment and unrelated party segment. And yes, such adjustment will always be there. When I am dealing with the third parties, I am doing the end-to-end in a value chain. While when I am dealing with my related party, I am manufacturing and selling it to him. So my job in a whole value chain is restricted only to the extent of the manufacturing, while post-manufacturing, which is sale and after-sale, is taken care by my related party. Now in both these situations, related party and unrelated party, can you make the same amount of profit? Are you expected to make? Answer is no. You are not expected to make the same profit, and therefore what you may have to do is make an adjustment for the selling, distribution and the marketing expenses, maybe even in the form of your inventory, in the form of your credit period. Because in a related party, you are giving him 30 days credit when you are making a sale, while in an unrelated party, you are giving him a 90 days credit. Good is the same, but 60 days extra credit which has been given, there is an implicit cost of the interest which is sitting in over there. Because there are no free lunches in this world. More and more credit you offer, the more and more the price will go up. So make those adjustments. So once you do the FR analysis, you will understand what kind of comparability I need to do and what kind of adjustments do I need to make. Those adjustments are allowed under the regulation. I can give you an example. If you are a manufacturing company and in one particular year, for 2 months there was a strike and there was a lockout. And as a result of the strike or the lockout, your company made less than the adequate profit or it made the losses when you look at the financial statements. But when you make an adjustment for that extraordinary event of the lockout for 2 months, for which you incurred the fixed overheads in the form of depreciation, it could be in the form of whatever those fixed overheads, reduce it from your profit and loss statement and rework your profit and loss statement. This is what the adjustment what I am talking about. Or if you have a transaction, international transaction, not necessarily with the related parties, and as a result of that there is a foreign exchange fluctuation which is coming in. It could be gain, it could be loss. Make adjustment for that, because when you do a transfer pricing analysis, basically with the profit, then the profit is never a PBT. The profit is always PBIT, or what they call it as an operating profit or the operating income. And the foreign exchange fluctuation is not an operating expenditure or an operating income. Make adjustment for that. So such kind of adjustments are required to improve the comparability standards. Do that and see where do you stand. So once comparables, internal, as I said, I may repeat, from an SDT perspective, my experience so far is internal comparables are the best comparables. And especially when you have, my previous speaker also mentioned about ATI 8 or ATI 10 kind of transaction, where it's very difficult to get the comparable third parties because you do not know how much profit or the loss that particular undertaking of a third party comparable company is making, because it's not available in the public information. So look for the internal. Internal comparability would be a mantra for all of you. And therefore, what you need to look at, some of the important factors when you look at the comparability analysis, especially if you are selecting a methods. And these are the price methods, which could be 3 price methods what they talk about: comparable uncontrolled price method, or the resale price method, or the cost plus, where the name itself suggests that it revolves around the price. So if you are doing that, especially if you are using CUP as a method, these 5 steps are very, very critical to look at. Product similarity. If this is a cross pen which I am selling it to the related party and unrelated party, there is a product similarity. There may be a slight difference in the product similarity. This is golden and I may be selling it only the silver to the related party. Doesn't matter, but there is a product similarity. But if I am distributing cross pen to the related party and link pen to the unrelated party, that is not the correct comparison. Both are pens, but that is not correct comparison. Then where you stand as a part of the value chain. Are you into the wholesale market or are you into a retail market? And classic example, those who are from the auto component industry. Auto component industry has 2 different markets. One, when they make a sale to the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, or the vehicle manufacturers. Same part, say for example tire. When tire is sold to Tata Motors, and when the tire is sold to the retail outlet, when we buy for the replacing our tire of any vehicle, price is completely different. So are you into a wholesale or are you into a retail market? Because an auto component company can have 2 different segments. One, which they make a sale to the OEM, and another, which they take better care of the aftermarket. And aftermarket always makes more money than the OEM sale. So where you are, which part of the value chain or the supply chain are you into, that is critical to look at. Geographic market in my view is not that greatly important as far as the domestic transactions are concerned, because you will rarely find that the price varies so significantly from one state to another state or from one city to another city. It's not that important, but yes, if your particular industry, which is sensitive to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 or tier 4 industry, please take care of it or please take a note of it. Then intangibles, especially in specified domestic transaction, either it could be technology intangible, which is in the form of technical know-how, or it could be marketing intangible in the form of the brand. You are an apparel manufacturer, but you cannot compare yourself with the Raymond, because Raymond has a great brand name compared to a normal apparel manufacturer. So because that name, brand name itself will give you a better price or the premium in the marketplace. So embedded intangible or the intellectual property plays a very, very important role in terms of how a price of the product would be done or what could be the profitability. I'll give you two simple examples. When you go to any shop and when you want to buy a chocolate, do you say I want a chocolate? No. You say I want a Cadbury. And actually you end up buying 5-star. Now this is the power of the brand. Or second good example could be, you want to take a photocopy, you go to the photocopier shop and you say give me 2 Xerox copies. Actually Xerox is a company which manufactures the photocopying machine. And incidentally the machine which is there in a photocopier could be of a Canon. So brand plays a very important role, especially in the FMCG or automotive market, or even for that matter pharma market. So where you are, if you are comparables or whether you yourself are carrying a great intangibles, it is bound to affect your pricing. Then you need to compare yourself with those who are like you. Don't compare with others. A normal candy manufacturer cannot compare himself with the Cadbury. He may compare himself with the Rawalgaon. That's a Rawalgaon sugar. That's the comparability which plays a very important role when you look at the comparability analysis. And the last very important, contractual terms. Because the contractual terms plays a very, very significant part in pricing of a product. I said slightly while ago, if I am offering more credit period, then my price is bound to be higher. Then when I do a cash sale, I offer him 2% discount. Why do I do that? Because I get my cash. Bird in hand is better than 2 in a bush. Right? I save on my interest cost. But if I offer you more and more in credit period, obviously I am going to charge you on a higher side. So credit terms plays a very important role, because such kind of an adjustment either in a price or the profits are allowed under transfer pricing. And this you can make out based on ratio analysis of the financial statements. The debtors, the inventory and the creditors you can make out. And now today with the new revised schedule 6, even the long term and the short term bifurcation is available, which was missing in the past till 2012. Then the warranty. If for a related party sale I am offering 15 months warranty, while for an unrelated party sales I am offering 30 months warranty. Now which would be having a better price? It's an unrelated party which would be having a better price, because I am taking a risk of incremental 15 months that the warranty may come back to me, and these all are built into your cost. So when you do your transfer pricing, keep all these things in mind. And therefore, see, transfer pricing, let me tell you, we have 6 sections and the 6 rules. Now there are so many sub-rules or APA and the safe harbor which has come in, but primarily 92 to 92F are the section and 10A to 10D or 10E are the rules. So what it is? Transfer pricing is more of a business case analysis and how you take your decision when you are doing your business, when you are conducting your business, and why you take such decision. That is what all about is transfer pricing. If I may say, even function, asset and risk analysis is no different than this. Your comparability analysis is no different than this. This is not a rocket science at all. If you start practicing it even for 1 year, you will realize this is anybody's game. It is, honestly speaking, I am telling you, it is anybody's game. Now, function, asset, risk analysis and comparability are very, very important, because based on that only you will determine out of 6 methods which we have, which is the most appropriate method for you. So function, asset, risk analysis